Good day and welcome to Distant Voice Network. Faith is my name and I'm here with Richard to conduct an exclusive critical interview on one of the least talked about and most sensitive language in our vocabulary. And this is one word other than suicide. Is there any identified problem in the way the media reports on suicide?
In fact, the importance of the media in society can never be underestimated in any way. But sometimes the style of reportage by some media outlets can be very problematic. The media can fuel an increase in suicide rate due to the way it handles reports on suicide.
Can you elaborate?
You see, there is an increase in suicide rates due to media coverage, including accurate description of the suicide method, the use of dramatic headlines that incorporate images in the article, and also when the report produces a romanticization of the suicide by giving it some sense of legitimacy. This, in many instances, actually create the impression that suicide is not too bad of an action, and therefore instigate people to use that as a means to an end when they find themselves in a little bit of a difficulty in their lives.
Is the rate of suicide and attempted suicide getting out of hand?
It does seem so, because reports of people committing suicide have actually become a norm in the media.
But why do you say that?
Look, it is reported that 1 in 100 deaths in the world is recorded to be direct result of suicide. And there is even a report that suicide rate in the African region is the highest in the world.
That sounds like a continental crisis, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Society seems to have gone a bit softer on the issue of suicide. And this is compounded by the numerous challenges faced by the continent.
Well, suicide is a very complex and a sensitive issue, with many factors combining to push someone to take such a drastic action. But between men and women, who do you think has the highest suicide rate?
According to available statistics, men are more likely to commit suicide than women.
But why is that so?
You see, for generations, men have been pressured to man up in their respective roles. And men are encouraged to be tough. And to some traditional and cultural groups, admitting that all is not well is a sign of weakness. So while women in their nature are often wrongly referred to as emotional, men are not encouraged to speak up at all. And this traces back to our childhood, when we are always told that boys do not cry.
How about communication in general? Does it play any role in the high and the low rate of suicide in both genders?
Generally speaking, women in their nature tend to be more vocal around even the slightest issues and even mental health. They often discuss their feelings with others rather than internalizing their emotions. And given that men are less likely to speak up when being hounded by problems, it makes them very less likely to get the treatment and help needed when they are going through struggles.
So what are the biggest issues affecting men's health?
That is quite a difficult one to answer because situations vary. But research also indicates that work pressures and financial pressures are the two biggest issues negatively affecting men's mental health. You see, most men have a tendency of seeing themselves as failures if they are not able to make provision for their families.
So which regions have the highest rate of suicide?
The WHO reports that the African region suicide rate is the highest of all regions compared to the global average.
Well, let's look at South Africa's case in perspective. Are the figures that scary, or is it something that we don't have to worry much about it?
Interestingly, South Africa is ranked number 10 on the list of countries with the most suicides. It's been reported that 23 suicides and 230 serious attempts are recorded on a daily basis. These figures surely makes it a matter of concern.
Well, let's look at some of the myths surrounding suicide. How true is the statement that talking about suicide or asking someone if they feel suicidal will encourage suicide attempts?
That is a myth that needs to be dismissed outrightly. In fact, talking about suicide provides the opportunity for communication, and fears can be shared in the process to diminish the thought. So simply inquiring about whether or not a person is intending to end his or her life can actually spark conversation if carefully managed.
How about the myth that people who talk about suicide never attempt or die by suicide?
That should also be carefully looked at, because sometimes talking about suicide can be a plea for help, and it can be a late sign in the progression towards a suicide attempt.
So what do you do if you have consent about a young person who talks about suicide?
You need to definitely encourage this young person to talk further, and also help that person to find appropriate counseling assistance. You need to also ask if the person is thinking about making a suicide attempt, and probe sensibly to see if they have a plan.
So once you establish that a person has a plan to attempt suicide, then what?
You then think about the completeness of the plan that the person is having and how dangerous the plan is. But one thing you need to keep in mind is never to trivialize the plans that seem less complete or less dangerous.
Trivialize? But why?
Because all suicide intentions are serious and must be acknowledged as such. There is no reason to think of a particular plan to be greater of interest than the other.
So how do you encourage this person?
You can do so by encouraging him or her to develop a personal safety plan. And this can include time spent with other people. Spending time with significant adults and dwelling on plans for the future can actually neutralize the possibility and the chances of a person going on to carry the plan of suicide.
They say many people or some people are always suicidal.
That is not true. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is suicidal at all times. The risk of suicide for any individual varies across time because circumstances changes all the time.
Well, it is also said that people who think about suicide are insane or mentally ill.
It's quite a tricky situation. You see, although people thinking about suicide are likely to be extremely unhappy and may sometimes be classified as having mood disorder like depression, most of them are not legally insane. But of course, a small number of individuals' mental state meet psychiatric criteria for mental illness and will therefore require psychiatric help.
So once a person thinks about suicide, will they forever think about it?
You see, most people who consider suicide will only be in that state for a limited period of their lives. Proper assistance and support will definitely lead to quick recovery, and they will continue to lead meaningful and happy lives unhindered by suicidal concerns.
Do you agree that the only effective intervention for suicide comes from a professional therapist with extensive experience in the area?
Not necessarily.
But why?
Because everyone who interact with people in crisis can help them by way of emotional support and encouragement. Psychotherapeutic intervention do also rely heavily on family, and friends providing a network of support. So it doesn't really make sense to say that only specialists will be able to assist people who have such thoughts. All people within the society, be it family, friends, close associates, or whatever, can be of substantial help to anyone that has suicidal thoughts.
People thinking about suicide are always angry when someone intervenes, and they will resent the person afterward. Is that not the case?
It's only common for people to be defensive and resist help at the first time. You see, behaviors of this kind are often barriers to test how much people care and are prepared to help. And for most adolescents, especially considering suicide, it is a relief to have someone genuinely care about them and to be able to share their emotional burden. When people who attempt suicide are questioned at a later time, the vast majority of them expresses gratitude for the intervention.
So what is your conclusion on this matter of concern? And what would you say to someone who's sitting at home right now and is attempting to commit suicide?
Life as it is not easy. Our problems are not the same, even if they look similar in nature. And surely, there will always be something to distort our plans and expectations, irrespective of how old we are, how educated we may be, or how uneducated we might be. The poor, the rich, and so on and so forth are not exempted from being hit by unexpected situations of life. So, the end result is that life is much more important than any other thing. A lot of people have died over the years. And sadly, none has returned to say what it feels or looks like in the afterlife. So whatever we go through, whatever situation we encounter, let's do our best to save our own lives and that of other people. Do not take your life, and do not ever take another person's life.
Well, thank you for listening this evening. This is where we draw the curtains, but always remember to stay positive and seek help when necessary. Thank you.